basketball. Let's look at some of the dominoes that could fall after KD's trade request. By the way, guys, KD was number 2 on that list. So what does it mean for Ben Simmons, who just posted this yesterday on his Instagram, that he's feeling incredible? Tim?
I mean, listen, Ben Simmons might be feeling incredible, but we haven't seen him on a court in 14 months, and I think at this point the Nets are focused on other things. So,
all right,
good for Ben Simmons.
And we know that there are a bunch of stars they can't trade for if Simmons is on the roster, so stay tuned there. All right, Wendy, what does it all mean for Steve Nash, the guy that was brought in because KD and Kyrie wanted?
He opened up a gorgeous bottle of wine last night.
Huge, huge bottle.
I mean, while he came to take this job trying to win a championship, he has to have been miserable. Coaching.
You can take out has to.
I mean,
they brought him in.
They're not going to win the title next year, maybe, but he's going to be a happier man.
And here is the $24 million, $36 million question. What does this mean for Kyrie, Nick?
Hey, I'm really going to miss Kyrie. I thought we really had a nice relationship going the last few months, but he's gone. And we were talking about what Sean Marks...
But he's going to see him in the fall, Nick.
Yeah.
We were talking about what Sean Marks was laying out to other teams when he had that end of the season press conference. He was really talking to one guy. He was talking to Kyrie, and he was saying, this is probably the end of all this unless you can make it work and show up. The Nets couldn't count on him. I would guess he ends up in L.A., and if he doesn't end up in L.A., as Brian has noted, does he actually play? Does he want to be out there and go through the motions on a team that he doesn't want to be with?
Yeah, and just to remind everybody, back on April 25th, after the Celtics eliminated the Nets from the playoffs, Kyrie had this to say.
When I say I'm here with Kev, I think that it really entails us, managing this franchise together alongside Joe and Sean and just our group of family members that we have in our locker room, in our organization.
It's like a family. It's like a bad family reunion. Yeah, all the family's got to go every other way. Got to get away.
Right.
Yeah, the faces in that room.
Yeah,
as
I'm
Kyrie,
going to ask you because you were there. Right.
We're sitting there, and he's saying this, and there are members in the organization in the back going, "Huh? What is this guy talking about?"
Right.
And that, to me, was the real final straw, because when he's putting himself on that kind of pedestal, after doing to the organization what he did by making the choice that he did, everybody at that point went, yeah, I don't know if this is going to last.
I mean, you're a billionaire owner there in Joe Tsai, right? You're an incredibly successful man, and to hear that person in particular say that he's going to run the team with you and the GM, I mean, that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
But I think Kyrie is going to have to wait this out, Hannah, because we're not going to really know what the Nets are going to want to trade him for until we see what Kevin Durant gets traded for. What's going to be on their books? How much salary can they take on? Do they accept a player in a sign and trade in that Durant deal, eventual Durant deal that hard caps them? So Kyrie definitely wants to go to LA. He's putting out the message, no matter what you do, I'm going to be in LA eventually anyway, so I'm a pure rental. He may be a part, as we said earlier, he may be a part of a Durant deal. I'm not going with Durant, but going to a third or fourth team. Let's discuss the Lakers real quick. Obviously, the Lakers are salivating at the possibility of trading for him. Not so much because they love the idea of Kyrie Irving. They love the idea of swapping out Russell Westbrook for Kyrie Irving.
Okay.
But Russell Westbrook makes $11 million more than Kyrie. That may be more than the Nets, who might be in the luxury tax, are willing to pay. And how much draft compensation can they squeeze out? So, Laker fans, Kyrie, you're going to have to sit there in the back seat and wait till the guy in the front seat, Kevin Durant, gets done.
Well, and that's the irony of this whole situation, right? We spent the last week talking about Kyrie Irving, right? What's Kyrie Irving going to do? How's that going to impact other people? At this point, Kyrie Irving is a passenger in this story. This is Kevin Durant driving the bus, to use a phrase that's been used recently about Kevin Durant.
Bus driver.
He is the bus driver right now. He's driving down the highway, and Kyrie is in the back waiting to find out where he's going to go. Because to Brian's point, the Nets don't really care.
I mean, I can't imagine the team wanting or needing to accommodate Kyrie in any way. It's certainly not the way we talked about with Kevin Durant.
Accommodate? I think just short of throwing him in that river is what they're.
And I think, to go back to the beginning too, those comments from Kyrie, they really sum up everything that's happened the past 3 years, right? Where, as you said, the fact that everybody's looking at him going, how could he be saying that? Well, he's saying that because that was what the last 3 years were. It was Kyrie and Kevin running the Nets. And the Nets, I think this summer, finally realized we can't have this go on anymore. And if they are going to be back, things have to start to look different.
How much of this is perceived around the NBA? You guys talk to so many people on the daily as a Nets issue or specifically a Kyrie issue.
I think there's a pie chart, and we could debate on the percentages of the pie chart, but they definitely, I mean, the first order of business, they signed DeAndre Jordan to a $40 million contract when nobody would have given him a fraction of that deal. That was their first thing that they did, was bring in their friend at a $40 million number. It's one thing to have somebody that you like on a minimum contract making $2 million for 1 year, $40 million over 4 years. That from the start, before they even dealt with the coach, before they even dictated who was in the starting lineup, they dictated how they spent $40 million on a free agent.
How much hardball do teams actually have to play with the Nets, given what they've seen from a distance?
Well, I mean, this is where the Kevin Durant extension, which, as you mentioned earlier, kicks in today, that he signed before last season, right? That's where this comes into play. Because if Kevin Durant had 1 or 2 years left on his deal, for as good as he is, it'd be a lot harder for the Nets to extract a lot of value. But because he has 4 years left on his deal, even if he gets to a place like, say, Phoenix or Miami where he wants to go, because he's under control for that long, it gives the Nets the ability to get a lot out of him in this trade.
The difference to me, Hannah, is Kevin Durant, even as things got choppy at the end with the Thunder, with the Warriors, with the Nets, everybody in those organizations knew he was going to give everything he had every day to try and make them better. The work ethic was never questioned. The work ethic now for Kyrie in Cleveland, in Boston, and now Brooklyn is always in question because nobody knows if he's going to be there, and when he is there, what kind of teammate he will be. And so that's why Durant will almost always get the benefit of the doubt, and the Nets may go out of their way to accommodate him. And that's why with Kyrie, whatever they can do to help their team right now, they will do. They will do him no favors whatsoever.
They could actually go in the same deal to different destinations. We don't know how this whole thing is going to shake out. Maybe the only thing you can question about KD, his undying loyalty, almost to a fault, to Kyrie Irving. All right, much more to talk about. Here's our Sunday night baseball matchup, by the way, for your holiday weekend. Kick it off, the Cardinals visiting the Phillies at 7 Eastern on ESPN, ESPN Deportes, and ESPN Radio. Our coverage begins at 6 Eastern with baseball tonight, Sunday night countdown. Michael Kay and A-Rod will have their K-Rod presentation, as always, on ESPN2. Coming up, so much more on Kevin Durant's stunning trade request, why he wants out of Brooklyn, where he could end up. Woj is here with the very latest. The Earth, and Kyrie, that's a whole nother subject as we welcome you back to Get Up live at the Seaport, brought to you by Chase. Friday of this holiday weekend. These fellas here are changing their plans as we speak. Oh my gosh, beginning with the Woj bomb of yesterday. We got Wendy here, we got Tim here, we got Nick here, all the voices you want to hear about a trade that could transform the NBA for years to come. Kevin Durant requesting a trade from the Brooklyn Nets. General Manager Sean Marks is working with KD and Rich Kleiman, his business rep, to find a trade partner. So if this is the end of KD and Kyrie, then it's fair to say that it did not go according to plan, including the playoffs. The two played a total of 58 games together across 3 seasons out of 247 scheduled games. And most importantly, of course, they won just 1 playoff series together. So KD coming here with a grand plan to come with Kyrie and win a championship out of the shadow of the Warriors, and it's all blowing up 18 months after the big three came together. How do we get here, Wendy?
You know, I think it was the way the last season ended. The Nets organization decided that they were not going to run it back. And then you had Kyrie, when he opted into his contract, saying, we're going to run it back. And that, even though that wasn't the only thing that happened, it was the breaking point. And Kevin Durant was the one who ended up pulling the ripcord here. But it could have well been the Nets. The Nets might have gotten to a point where they wanted to break them up anyway. Maybe not this week, but I don't think they could stomach the concept of bringing them back. And the reason that got to that point is a multi-layered situation with multiple people involved in it. But it was clear the Nets could not stomach the concept of having another season where they were, being left by the whims of Kyrie Irving, and that affected and really infected everything that was going on.
I mean, you said there were 2 tentpole dates in this one that you talked about in our meeting this morning, that you can really bookend this story.
Yeah, I think you could sum everything that's happening right now back to 2 dates. In October, when the Nets said to Kyrie Irving, you either need to be all in or all out, and either get the vaccine or not play at all. He chose to not play at all, sending a clear message that he was going to do what he thought was best for him and not the team, unlike Andrew Wiggins in Golden State, for example. And then in December, in the middle of December, when the Nets brought Kyrie Irving back in the middle of the season, when, by the way, we all forget they were in first place in the Eastern Conference and rolling along, and things were great. They bring back Kyrie Irving. 6 weeks later, James Harden's gone, and that's the beginning of this thing, as you said earlier, going kablooey.
Yeah, Nick Friedel, he lived this thing day to day. Nick, I want to get your perspective after we talk to Woj really quick, because Woj is available to us, and Woj, obviously, this could be a transformational trade for any team. It could make a team a title contender immediately. So, what is the very latest on trade talks as we know it this morning?
Yeah, Hannah, the volume of calls and really the ferocity of the inquiries over the last 18 hours or 15 hours, however long it's been since the trade request was made. It's been unlike, I think, teams on both sides, both the Nets and those who would like to be involved in getting Kevin Durant have experience in the league, because there simply hasn't been a player like Kevin Durant available for trade with 4 years left on his deal, and certainly, at or very close to the apex of his talents. And so I think for Brooklyn, they'll take some time here to sort through, I think, the variety of the kind of directions they can go. Is it going to be, young players in draft picks? Is it going to be picks and a veteran all-star who could come in and plug in with Ben Simmons and Patty Mills and Joe Harris and that team and still have, a very good team? I think all of those avenues are available to Brooklyn, and there's no shortage of suitors and teams who, some teams said to me, we called back and countered off our first offer, upped it without even Brooklyn countering us. That's not how any of us normally do business, but nobody wants to be left having not offered enough, and Brooklyn does a trade somewhere else and they don't get a chance at KD.
Yeah, and keep in mind, the reason we're talking about picks so much, obviously, for those at home who may not remember that they traded their picks to acquire James Harden, who, of course, is now in Philly. And listen, we know that KD tied his fates to Kyrie Irving here in New York. So what does all of this mean for Kyrie?
Yeah, listen, I think they may not move in the same deal. I think that remains to be seen. I think that's less likely. There's a much shorter list of teams who would be interested in Kyrie Irving, but there will be interest. There is interest in him. I think that's a different process. I think that's nobody has to think very hard about whether KD fits in if they can make a trade. But I think certainly with Kyrie Irving in the last year of his contract, there are going to be opportunities for trades for Irving. But I think, listen, for this Brooklyn organization, the two of them were obviously very tied together. They came in together. KD wanted to help Kyrie Irving get that contract extension that he didn't get this year in Brooklyn. But I think the market for Kyrie Irving, that may play out in a little different way, especially as some teams get out of free agency. Other trades they might make fall through. Free agents may leave their team and they look and they say, could we assimilate Kyrie Irving into our team? I just think that's a different process and a different conversation than the all-out pursuit of offering up, your best assets for Kevin Durant.
Right, in a trade unlike any, I mean, maybe Kawhi a few years ago as a comparison, but you're looking at a player who many consider to be the best in the NBA. He's available. He is available for 4 years. So stay tuned, as they say. Woj, thank you so much.
Thanks,
and I believe now we also have a future Hall of Famer, Vince Carter, joining us this
hour. How you doing? What's going on,
VC,
panel?
looking at this from afar, what is your perspective?
From afar, it's kind of like if he were to say he wanted to trade it, you wouldn't be surprised. But at the same time, it's like, okay, wow. And